Post-disaster trauma. There are few techniques and strategies that can be used in dealing with experiencing disaster or crisis trauma. Now, to understand trauma is to understand that, one, it affects everybody differently, and two, it could be caused from an event that is done, that could be happened by one event or the same event being repeatedly done to a person. Now, many people show resilient reactions to trauma, or they even show transient type symptoms and repercussions that do not meet the diagnosis criteria for PTSD. But it may manifest in some way in many different signs of the disease in a way that is obviously identifiable. Now, there is a technique to recognize one's mental state to help figure out if you have trauma. And this technique is called the window of tolerance. This is an idea that being inside your window indicates that your function and overall health are satisfactory. There are 7 tools, and this is one of them. You're in a traumatic stress reaction when you are outside your window. And this indicates that you can be triggered. And basically, being triggered is a form of PTSD. It can be beneficial to recognize and practice the skills required to stay in your window, in your safe zone, so to speak, so you can be aware of the good and the negative states. Communicating to others about your window and your triggers can help you find the resources to help you, and it can also help you set reasonable expectations about your capacity for handling situations. And this way, it also helps others understand what you can tolerate and what you can't, so there's no miscommunication. Now, a symptom of PTSD can vary. There's sleeping disturbances, nightmares, flashbacks, extreme anxiety attacks, the inability to focus by having inadequate sleep might make it difficult to perform well at work or at school. So having these symptoms of PTSD can affect more than you would think. Your relationships can suffer because of it, because of irrational moods and quick temper because you're irritable because of lack of sleep. Now, there's ways you can help with this, and there's a variety of ways, but some ways can be using a weighted blanket. Some can even be considered, what's the word? Hugging something or feeling hugged, and that is where a weighted blanket can come into play. Now, there are counterproductive approaches, and there's cognitive errors that one can actually portray to somebody who has dealt with trauma. And that issue is misinterpreting a situation and overlooking one's trauma because you don't think it's considered a drastic event to cause trauma. And that can be a big issue when trying to help someone overcome their own trauma. Idealization is another one, exhibiting false defenses. Idolization, explanations for the offender's actions, making excuses because the offender is a caregiver, even. These reactions can be considered Stockholm Syndrome, and it's a way to cope, but it's not a healthy way to cope. And it's not good. And it becomes harder to overcome this type of trauma. Other kinds are basically just overgeneralization of a trauma-related incident, or the belief on how it reflects the impairment on someone's ability to discriminate at danger and safety. And having someone who's anxious, even someone young, these impairments can be discrimination, extinction learning, and responsiveness to safety cues. So you go from an area that doesn't have gun violence, and then all of a sudden there's gun violence, and a child doesn't understand that being outside at a certain time of day is not safe. Or going from an area that's really dangerous and not, that same child could not want to go outside because they feel it ain't safe. They're too scared and their anxiety is too high. Now, another counterproductive way of responding to trauma is avoidance. Their behaviors for avoidance and emotional blunting or numbing can decrease. And it could help make things worse. Because it's not a quick fix. Avoidance is not a quick fix. Having avoidance can give relief from stress, but it can make things very hard long term for someone dealing with trauma. There's trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's sessions, evidence-based treatment for children that are 12 to 16 different types of sessions. And it's designed to address PTSD in children and adolescents, and even caregivers that are non-offenders. Another type of assistance is session coding. Sessions were drawn from a larger project that were consisted of 3 phases. The focus of the current study is the narrative phase of treatment, during which children develop a trauma account to activate trauma memories. So basically taking time to bring up the trauma and and figure out the trauma can help a child eventually overcome the trauma. And they could take some time. And coders can be a team of 19 coders. And in all sessions, it could be a narrative phase. 2 coders rated each session, and it can make things show progress or non-progress based on things that come up in each session, and if there's progress or no progress in treating the trauma. Now, older children can show negative emotions or overgeneralization of a trauma, and not the actual peak issues of the trauma. Now, age was not significantly associated with these levels of decentering, but it gives you a variety of pre-treatment symptom severity of internalization, externalization, or PTSD symptoms. So it can be consistent with hypothesis and association with more negative emotion when processing a trauma, which can eventually help figuring out the best way to help someone with these traumas. Overgeneralization can process negative emotions and cause lower levels of decentering rather than avoidance. And these patterns have been able to find more immersions in trauma-related content and responses in people. And in the following resources about trauma in children were developed by the NCTSN. Now, to figure out a specific topic or resource, you can use them and use their search box to find the trauma type you're trying to help with in the language or the audience you're trying to help. So maybe an adult or a child, PTSD or gun violence trauma. There's a lot of different things you can find using the NCTSN. There's also training information, public awareness information, and if you don't speak English or read English, there's information in Spanish. The goal is to enhance quality of treatment, expand the reach of resources for traumatized individuals across the country, not just in one area. And that's pretty much it. Finding ways to help trauma and help individuals with this trauma and overcome it and be successful in their lives after trauma has affected them. Thank you.